Bet your morning can't come soon enough. Here's your look at new Asmus Toys, Evil Dead 2 Dead by Dawn, Ash Williams, Luxury Edition. The Evil Dead 2 Ash Williams 6-scale figure features an authentic and detailed, fully realistic likeness from the film Evil Dead 2, directed by Sam Raimi in 1987. The figure stands at 12.4 inches tall and has over 32 points of articulation and an authentic likeness to the actor Bruce Campbell. It's hard to have a relaxing night when you got to deal with the likes of a Deadite. Before we get a closer look at the Luxury Edition Ash Williams, I'd like to thank the folks over at Asmus Toys that did provide the sample that we're going to have a look in this video. Let's go ahead now and grab the tape measure just to see how tall the figure stands. Clickety-click barb trick right to the very top of Ash's head. The figure stands just a little over 11 inches in height, and flipping that then around to centimeters, you're looking at the figure standing about 28.5 centimeters tall. At least from the standpoint of Ash, nothing changes between this one and the standard release that we looked at before. In fact, for the purpose of comparisons, moving over now the Luxury Edition Ash, you'll see right now in a second, it is the exact same figure that we gotten before. Now, the deluxe version or Luxury Edition of Ash, one thing that he does benefit from having is the ripped, torn shirt, something that the original standard release did not have. So even if you are buying this one, maybe not with the intended plan of displaying it with the more elaborate display stand that comes along with this figure, you at least get the torn shirt and a different way of displaying the figure on your shelf. Aside from the elaborate display stand, Luxury Edition Ash also comes included with the same hexagonal display stand that came packaged with the standard release as well. This hexagonal display stand does have the same printing of the flooring from the inside of the cabin, as you can see, been generously soaked in blood. Just to bring in the other one that we had got before, this is the standard release Ash Williams, and while it may look like they are identical to one another, they did make one correction here on the front placard. If you had seen the original one and questioned maybe the spelling was a little bit off, they did in fact miss the I in Williams, or at least the second I just after the L. And that was the reasoning why they included this second placard sticker. That was to replace the correction that needed to be made on the front of the display here. They have, though, made the correction and included the corrected spelling here of Ash Williams now with the second I after the L. Other than that, though, it is the exact same display stand. The printing seems also to be the same, so the blood, if you're looking for a different placement of blood, it's in the exact same spot. One thing that also comes with this is still the adjustable neck. That's the cradle, of course, the figure is going to be standing over top of. Make use of this, because this is going to also unplug from this display stand, and it's going to also carry over to the elaborate display stand we're going to have a look at now. Torn shirts, I'm sure, aren't the only reason why many collectors opted to go with the Luxury Edition Ash over the standard release. As you can see, the Luxury Edition Ash also comes with a super detailed base featuring the cellar door that we see from the film. Just to see what this is on its own, let's once again bring back in the tape measure and measure off to the very top of it. It's about 2 inches actually in height, give or take about 2¼ inches. So of course, one thing about this is if you are now adding Ash on top of it, it's going to increase the height of him quite a lot, well, again, by 2¼ inches. So he's not going to be quite in line with the other Ash unless you decided to have both the figures displayed on this same display stand. And then that's going to come into a little bit more problems when we look at Henrietta in a second. Picking, though, up the display stand, one thing I'll tell you right off the bat is it doesn't feel like it's made of plastic. It feels, in fact, like it's actually been cast in resin, as there's some substantial weight going on here. One thing I really do like is the detail that Asmus put into this, right to the fact that they actually did have raised lettering of Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. Sorry, let's just move the chain out of the way here. You can also see some evil roots have now started to come out of the wooding here. You can see some nice cracks around sort of the outer circumference of the actual display stand. Evil looking roots, as you can see, all sticking their way out. Nicely painted with both the darker and lighter green. I might have even not even gone the extra mile of painting in the green. I think the coloring of the roots of the lighter color was more than enough. But I do like the way that they've actually cracked the panels of the wood as the roots are sticking their ways out. And again, you've got that nice front placard that sticks out from the rest of the display stand. Carefully, just going to hold on to the top of the cellar door because I don't want that to swing out. Just flip this around. And inside, or underneath at least, you can see it says Evil Dead 2. Although what they've done is they've faded one end of it and faded the other end. So while looking at it, it actually just almost looks as if you're looking at DEA. Evil and the end of dead, at least a little harder to see. And then the product code is ED22039. They have put on very, very narrow, shallow felt feet on the corners of it just to prevent the scratching on the surfaces. Carefully flipping this back over. Like I said, it does have some substantial weight to it. Like in the film, it does have the chain that actually can connect through the 3 ringlets and then finally loop through the final ringlet that actually has the padded lock. Now again, you can take the same chain and do that. You just have to kind of bring this around. And there are magnets right here. The magnets aren't there necessarily for the chain. They're there for the back wall that has the window. But sometimes the chain does actually get attached to that. You just easily remove it. But then you just feed it through the ringlets here and then finally through the padded lock. That will prevent any deadite that is coming from the underground dwellings from coming out and grabbing ash. Carefully though, just leaning this forward just enough that I can grab it. They actually have put like just a little bit of a gap space right here that you can get your finger in there to open this up. Being the material that they've used, I wouldn't want to have this swing down accidentally because that could possibly cause damage to the peg. But one thing you'll see is that they've done just as much work on the interior of the cellar and the inside door as they did to the outside as well. Sorry, didn't mean to startle you there. Before we actually finish the rest of the diorama flooring, I did want to show you the deadite that looks underneath the cellar door. This is Henrietta. Now, I have seen some individuals commenting that their Henrietta wasn't finished, that the paint wasn't finished all on the figure. Now, I can only really speak, obviously, to the one that I have in front of me. I think, personally, Henrietta looks pretty good. It's not to say that some Henriettas didn't actually get circulated around that had unfinished paint. But again, I can only speak to the one that I have right here. I think the skin has been handled really well here. You've got these off-decayed coloring of the skin with open wounds there on the side of the face. Also on the arm there as well. The eyes are off-colored, sort of giving that deadite stare. And even the interior of the mouth has been handled well on Asmus's part. Something also commented on was the state of her hair. Now, again, only looking at the one that was provided to me by Asmus, it seems like the hair is actually pretty good on this. Sort of mimicking something what you would expect like a cobweb to be. And it's rooted quite well to the back of the head. Now this again is heavy. Feeling as if this was probably again cast in that same material, possibly a resin. It's definitely not plastic. You can see the Henrietta's one arm is reaching out to grab anyone that's suspecting nearby that cellar door. You can take Henrietta, just going to put that to the side for a second here, and just open up the cellar door. I'm going to do this a little closer so you can see what's going on here. They've allotted a space out of what I would only guess to be about 2.5 inches or so. So when you are putting Henrietta in, you're not putting her in completely to the point where you're not going to be able, well, you can cover the door completely. Even when you move her around, for example, the cellar door will always stay open at about 3 inches or so, about 2 inches, give or take. So there's never really a way to close the door completely with Henrietta inside, for obvious reasons that the arm is sticking out the way that it is. You can also move Henrietta slightly further back so you can actually still see and make out the eerie face looking at you. The thing about it, though, is while you are putting Henrietta inside the cellar door, just moving the chain out of the way, if you take yourself Ash and you put him on top of it, you're already losing a lot of footprint space of displaying the figure. One thing we don't have just yet is also, again, the post that's going to hold the vise of Linda's head. And, of course, the back walling here that's going to have the window. So already that's going to be losing a lot of space. I would suggest, and going back to where's the posted wall, where's the post? Again, the post part, the same thing that we looked at earlier for the display stand. Actually, that was the one that was missing the clip. Let's just grab the one that here came with the standard release. Popping that in place. And if you take Ash and you put him on that display stand, you can already see, I haven't brought this up completely, mind you, but it doesn't give you really a lot of space to work with. When you are displaying the figure, you sort of have to put part of Ash's boot leaning into the opening of the cellar door, because if not for that, the figure's going to be too far back. And especially when we start adding then the wall, I think it's just too little space to work with. Now, granted, honestly, Asmus Toys could have also increased the width of this. Not so much on this side, because there's nothing that really needs to be on this side other than Linda's head. I'm going to talk more about that in a second. But at the very least, they maybe could have increased the length. Now, that could have also increased the price of the luxury edition. But if they had just allotted maybe about another inch and a half or so, I think that would give a little bit more space for Ash to fit on, especially if you're still considering to put Henrietta inside the cellar door. One other thing I did want to mention, though, about the posts is the difference between the basic and the luxury edition. The length is different on the connecting posts at the bottom. This is the one that came included with the luxury edition. This is the one that came included with the standard release. I was surprised, honestly, that they didn't use the exact same length post. It would involve them to have doweled in that hole a little bit deeper. Because if you try to use the one that came included with the standard release Ash, as I did do earlier when I tried to put Ash on top of it, you'll notice it doesn't go completely all the way down. Why I was using this one, you may ask, and not using really the one that came included with the luxury edition, is unfortunately mine is separated. You see right there. It did come included still with the crotch clip, but if you try to put that inside, for mine at least, it opens it completely up. So for me, unfortunately, I'm going to have to add a little bit of glue into the top there just to keep the seam shut, because you obviously will need to use the one that came included with the luxury edition. The standard release just isn't going to cut it. As that's certainly now in place, let's bring in the wall here. This is another part, and an equally heavy part that's going to attach to the back of the display stand. For the purpose of this, I have removed Henrietta just off to the side there. And that's also just remove the post because we don't really need that just yet. There are magnets. You can see there's button magnets actually embedded into this resin material that they would have used. Again, I suspect it's resin. It's definitely not plastic. But there are connecting magnet points here that actually do align up with the magnets that are on the back. It's not just magnets keeping everything together because there's a lot of weight going on here. If you look at the back, though, now this will be the outside of the cottage, the cabin. You can actually see there's the window frame. And it's actually nice the fact that they did finish this from all the sides, not only from the front that you would normally have seen it when you're having Ash on display, but they did actually take the time to finish it on the outside. Not really, again, a part that you're really going to be seeing when you're displaying it. But I do like the fact that they did go the mile of actually sculpting it all the way around, even having the end of the wood sort of frayed and shredded like this. Really nice looking window. Now, the window itself, it doesn't look much like this, like it's not the right length right now, but when we are putting it in place, the window really needed to be just a little bit longer, because as you'll see in a second, when Ash is standing next to it, his head actually goes a little higher than the window. Again, it would be involving them having to increase the length of it and increasing the cost of producing this. So this is unfortunately one of those cases where the wall just isn't as long as the character that's standing in front of it. Anyways, you're going to take this part of it, and what this is going to do is this is going to slot into the opening located here on the back. Now, I did find putting it in straight down that you have to kind of shimmy it back and forth. If you put it in on an angle like this, I'm just going to put it down here for a second, and then put the pressure then on the other side. It seems to be the easiest to put it in place. And again, we're going to bring in the Ash, and just to show you what I'm talking about here, maybe also helpful as well to bring up the camera just a little bit. Yeah, you can see like right there, if I move Ash just off to the side, the window that he would have been boarding up and looking out, the window really technically should be a little bit higher. It's a sacrifice that of course has to be made. I'm just happy with the fact that we actually did get a fully finished diorama stand like this. But yes, the window is technically just a little bit shorter. If you're looking at where he started to board up the windows, if you actually put Ash down, it seems a little bit more in line with where the window should have actually been from the inside of the cabin. And like I said, it's just they've moved it down just a little bit. A small little gripe. It's not even really a gripe either. One other thing that we can also do for the rest of the assembly of the display stand, just then to bring the camera back down a little bit here, is there's a hole right here. This is not the hole that's going to hold the clip. That's actually for over here. We've already looked at that. But this is the part that actually holds the vise. You've got yourself a nice wooden post, making use of, again, that same material. It's more tapered off at the bottom and wider at the top. This is the part that actually holds the vise. This is the part that's going to connect to the bottom. And it sort of has like an off coloring of a purple, a slight purple tint to it. So it's not just brown on top of brown on top of brown. This just plugs into the bottom just like that. And it's pretty secure enough. It's not going to be going anywhere. And then you get this extra piece of boarding. This is the part that's going to have the vise attached to it. Again, the fact it's finished from all the sides, they've actually added a nice clear coat on top of it as well. Really, really nicely handled here. Now this is going to plug in. Now when you are plugging in, see these holes that are on the end and there's no holes on this side? These are the holes that are going to be facing and connecting eventually to this part right here, as you have a triangular bracket that we're going to look at. But these holes are going to want to face this way. And then you're just going to take then this, and that's going to fit over top of the post. When you are putting it down, you want to make sure that you're putting it down enough. Let me just pick this back up again so you can see. If you put it down far enough, then it leaves an extra lip of that peg sticking up. That lip is ever crucial because when you do get eventually the vise and attach that, there's a hole on the underside of the vise, and that needs that extra little bit of afforded space on that peg to attach. If you have it a little higher up, then the vise doesn't have enough to grip onto. We just then take the head vise, and that just plugs into place as well. Nicely detailed as well as the vise. It looks like it has a metal look and feel to it. And again, it probably was molded here. In this case, plastic. It doesn't have nearly the weight that the rest of the base has. It is technically working in the sense that you can move these back. The actual handle, I don't know if that would be I guess it would be considered the handle. The thing about it though is just you can turn it, but don't turn it by here, just in case you snap this by mistake. This turning doesn't actually decrease or increase the space for the vise. You have to do that by hand. Just take the vise and pinch closer together if you want to. Or if you need to free up a little bit of space to store a Deadite head, for example, then you may want to bring that a little bit further. But yeah, you're going to have to do that manually. The last thing we will need to do, I just want to make sure I've got this connecting the right place. Okay, good. The last thing we need to do is add the triangular bracket. That's the last thing of completing the steps of building this. You get yourself this wooden triangular piece. And you'll notice that there's pegs. See here, just focusing the camera for a second. There we go. You can see there's pegs along the top. There's pegs along the side. What you don't want to do is connect it this way because there's no holes along the post. What you want to do is connect the pegs to this side of it and onto the other side, line them up to the holes provided, and then the pegs that are on this side are actually going to connect to the pegs that are on the back of the wall. Now you can do this one of two ways. You can attach everything like what I've just done right now and then line everything up to the wall. I find it's personally easier. If you prefer, though, you can put the post down first and then try to take that triangular bracket and line everything up. You can also just tilt the walls slightly and just get everything lined up and connected in place. And once that's good to go, the only thing that's missing is the other Deadite that comes included with this set. Introducing then Linda's head. Linda's head here, as in the film, is separated from the rest of her body. That body is elsewhere for the time being. As this head is going to be fitting inside the vise, it doesn't necessarily need a display stand. It's been well painted on the underside where the head's been hacked right off. The hair's real rooted hair. I do think the lighter coloring of the blonde is maybe not quite movie accurate. I think in the film she actually has more closer to being a lighter brown color and not necessarily blonde. Also, the length of her bangs I don't think are this short in the film. In the movie, they're long enough, in fact, that she has them just more draped off to the side like this. But in this case, they actually have given her shorter bangs. It's the only thing that's a little off about the head sculpt. The paint is pretty handled well here on the head. In fact, on the back of it, the way they've rooted the hair actually is nicely handled. The hair itself is actually pretty good too. It feels, in fact, like real human hair. I can't imagine. I hope they're not using real human hair. What they have done is also added a back bald cap. So when you see it, for example, the back here is actually colored similar to the blonde hair that they've rooted in place. In fact, just to move the bangs away, what they've done is they've added like literally a softer cap. You can see like right there as I'm squeezing this. I don't want to squeeze it, mind you, too much, but this is actually just a softer cap that they've capped over top the back of the head. And then the front of the head is actually the harder plastic. It's been painted well. You've got the smaller, more scissor-like teeth that she has. Very gummy-looking mouth here. Big Deadite staring eyes again. And yeah, it's a decent-looking Linda. It's not perfect. It's not as much like movie accurate as I would hope, but still the idea that we did get ourselves a Deadite Linda head is a nice touch on their part. Now you can take Linda's head and just fit it inside the vise. It's best to probably have the vise wider first, and then once you put Linda's head in there, just close the vise shut. And that's not going to prevent her from going anywhere. Certainly not going to prevent her from biting Ash. And that really does look nice. Yes, again, already mentioned, it does increase the height of Ash, but I'm thinking most of the people that are probably going to be getting the luxury edition aren't simply, again, just getting the figure solely for the fact that the figure comes included with the ripped and torn shirt. No, they're going to be wanting to get the set for the elaborate display base. Again, whether I will decide to actually display Henrietta, once again, I'll just open things up. Might as well have both the Deadites displayed together. Just opening up the cellar door here. Again, you can kind of get your fingers in there. There we go. And just opening up just enough to get Henrietta in there. I mean, I like the touches of having both Deadites on the display stand. But once again, bringing a talking point I mentioned earlier, just to bring back in Ash, there really isn't a lot of space for him to work with. In fact, even though I did mention that my post was split down the middle, I might even just decide to leave the post off completely. Because without the post, I can actually have Ash a little further off to the edge. I don't think he's necessarily going to be falling off the display stand, but having the post closer towards the cellar door really then keeps the figure having to be a little bit more centered. And I think in a case like this, I would want to have Ash a little more off to the side like I've got right now. The majority of the accessories that come along with the luxury edition are in fact the same ones that came packaged already with the standard release. So if you already have the standard release, you may be experiencing a sense of deja vu with all the things we're about to have a look at. Like, for example, my favorite thing packaged with both the releases is the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, loosely translated to be the Book of the Dead. As is the case with the other one that we looked at already, it is an actual bound book with real flippable paper pages. Like with Bloody Snowflakes, is there such a thing as Bloody Snowflakes? In this case, yes. Like snowflakes, each one of the pages seem to be unique. And providing you don't have the means of translating this, then you have nothing really to worry about. The few times that I've already opened up the book, you can already see it does warp the book slightly. But being that the fact that the book is bound and wrapped, and not skin necessarily, but at least a softer rubber, usually you can just warp this back by bending this a little bit like this, just to kind of keep the pages back together. But I kind of like the idea of having this look as if the book has been opened and flipped several times, just leaving it a little bit frayed like this. Very, very cool. The figure also, in fact, comes included with the same Kandarian dagger as also what we looked at earlier. The Kandarian dagger is molded again in this softer plastic with the end of its spinal cord being the sort of the tip of the dagger. Again, you've got the skull there nicely painted. At some point, I would love to get myself hands, not on real ones, of course, because that would come with lots of problems, but maybe get myself a 1-to-1 scale version of the Kandarian dagger and a 1-to-1 scale of the Book of the Dead. I just don't know where I would put that. Very, very cool the fact that we do get, once again, the Kandarian dagger. Other things that get reappearances here is, again, the shotgun. The shotgun, like the one that we looked at already, can be opened up. And while it doesn't hold anything inside of the chamber, smaller shells would be certainly something that would be lost if you tilted the shotgun upside down. I can certainly understand why they didn't decide to put shells. I suppose if you had something small enough, you could put something in there to make it look like shells, but I'm fine for the fact that they didn't include it in the first place. Now, my other Ash, as we saw at the very end of that earlier review, I had the figure displayed with the shotgun actually just cocked over top of his shoulder and this stump arm there. I may keep that figure displayed like I just changed it obviously back for the purpose of bringing him in for this review. I'm not sure really how I would end up displaying this Ash if I do decide I want to display him with the torn shirt, because that is one other thing that makes this figure different from the one that we looked at before. I'm probably going to be displaying the figure with the chainsaw. Speaking of chainsaws, segueing ourselves back over to the chainsaw, it is the same, yes, chainsaw that we did also get before. I know, sense of deja vu. The chainsaw, once again, the teeth and blade portion of the chainsaw is handled with metal. It's heavier, it's cool to the touch, and you notice right away when picking this up, there's definitely metal happening here. It works also the same way because, again, this is just a repackage of the exact same accessory. There's a pull cord by the motor. When you pull the cord out, what it does is it lifts and lowers the blade, the teeth portion of the chainsaw. You can let it go and it springs back a little bit, or again, you can continue to pull this back and forth. My problems still continue with this, being that it's just the exact same accessory as before. It's fine that the fact that they did use metal, and I appreciate the fact that they would have gone the mile of actually adding some extra heavier, more die-cast feeling materials. The problem with it, though, is this is always going to be a problem when I find with displaying this on Ash's arm. It adds a lot of extra weight. I think in a case like this, I mentioned this already, while I do appreciate that Asmus would have gone the mile of adding a metal teeth portion to the chainsaw, I really do think that plastic would have been fine. And it would have kept things a lot lighter, especially when attaching this to his arm, which we'll do in a second. Other options available for his arm. If you do remove the arm, there's the taped off portion of his stump. That is also something that carries over from one basic set figure to now the luxury edition. You, again, get the exact same taped off stump. You also get yourself the possessed hand. And again, I just love the look of this hand. Prior to, again, taking down the way I had the figure displayed initially, I had the evil possessed hand sort of resting on Ash's shoulder, and I might continue that trend. I don't know if I'm going to do that necessarily with this figure, if I'm already going to be doing it with the standard release, but just a really neat, eerie looking hand. You can see like the gashes on the tops of the hand. I really like sort of that kind of frozen in time, like fingers, the way they've got them. Really think that's super cool. And again, like you've got the end stump there with the bones sticking out there. Rigor mortis, that was the word I was looking for. It sort of looks like it's got frozen rigor mortis as that's set in. Of course, it's now been severed from the rest of Ash's hand. For some reason, that kind of looks also like a face. Missing, of course, the other eye, but that looks like an eye, a nose. Kind of looks like the bottom teeth of a skull. I think I'm starting to see things. What I'm not seeing also is the fact that the figure doesn't come included with, once again, that film reel, that audio reel tape recorder. That is one thing I really wish that this figure could have come included with. Maybe if not anything, coming included with the original figure, at the very least, I think it should have also come included with the luxury edition. Other things that, of course, come included with this release figure is a bunch of different swappable hands. You get some gestured hands. And each one of them are really dirty and grimy. I would even like to maybe use these hands for other figures I have in my collection space. He does come with a couple of closed fists. Not granted the most interesting of hands to look at, but still. And the figure also comes with a gripping hand that's perfectly suited for holding the Book of the Dead. You sort of just wedge the hand against that, and he holds the Book of the Dead in his hand. He comes with a couple of those, and he also comes with a gripping hand for holding, like the Kandarian dagger, for example. You could take the Kandarian dagger, slide that inside his gripping hand, and the figure can hold that as well. I don't think I've ever really seen Ash holding. Does he ever hold the Kandarian dagger? But I guess that's an option, again, if you wanted to. Again, I really do like these hands. I know I probably didn't spend too much time talking about this already. And he comes, of course, with the boomstick hand also as well. Like, the hands are just nice, dirty, and grimy. I'm almost even considering using it with some of my Michael Myers figures I already have on display. The other thing the figure also comes included with, not mentioned already, is the figure comes also with some swappable pegs. This just happens to be one of two. So again, if you have any issues and any one of those pegs do break, you've got a couple at least extra ones to work with. For those that pulled the trigger and decided to also get the luxury edition Ash over the standard release, one other thing that will also be packaged in with this figure is the alternate Deadite Ash head sculpt. As you can see right here, it sort of has more of a bruised purple skin tone. I'm not sure if it's actually this color in the film. I feel his complexion is still a little bit lighter, Deadite being possessed or not. You can see the way they've really given a gnarly looking face for Deadite Ash. Recessed in the eyes, giving a very nice glossy, lifeless stare to those eyes, and darkening the coloring around the eyes and sort of more of a very shiny burgundy red. That looks really nice. He does have all these nice little gashes there on the sides of his face, little cuts, wounds, and stuff he's inflicted. And there's also blood along the top of his head, something that's also on the default head as well. Really like this head sculpt. The only thing about it, though, is when you are putting it against the figure, I'm just going to move the default Ash head just out of the way just for a second. If you put the Deadite Ash head next to it, you can see like it's not quite the same coloring as his neck, which would really be hard to do anyways, because of course, if they made it a more transitioned color and you added a little bit of airbrushing of purple onto the top to match this coloring, then it wouldn't quite line up with the coloring of this skin tone. Anyways, to change out the heads, simply just hold on to the torso. Now, he does actually have a ball joint. I find it helps if you just pinch the neck slightly to sort of help hold on to the post, as I've seen some cases where the post has come right out. But if you sort of hold around here, it's enough to kind of keep the post from moving around or coming out of the socket of the neck. And then from there, just go ahead then and take the head of the Deadite Ash, and again, just sort of hold on to things. Again, you can kind of do the same trick of holding on to the post. Now, there is at times, I've noticed sometimes when you're putting the head on, that it leaves a space, leaves a gap. Depending on how successful, whether you have Lady Luck working with you. There we go. I find just a little bit of an extra snap, just an extra little bit of force. You can get the head right on there, and there's no gap whatsoever. Now, you can already see what I mean. Like, just to show you the difference between the two, this is the defaulted head, this is the Deadite Ash head. The neck definitely works better for obvious reasons with the Deadite, with the default head, as the Deadite skin tone is a little too purple. You can kind of hide that a little bit, I find, by just moving the head down a little bit, so you don't see the neck as much. The head does look a little on the longer side. One of the issues I certainly had, not so much an issue with the defaulted head, was the head does seem a little on the bigger side. It's not so big in this case, wide, but it does seem a little bit big on the longer side. I just love the idea that they would have even included this in the first place. The last thing, though, that the Luxury Edition Ash comes included with is his torn shirt. He still has the full sleeve intact on this side, but all this side, like in the film, it's torn away to expose the side of his body. And of course, the arms that are going to be coming out this one side also as well. Now, Asmus did do one other thing to include with the torn shirt, and that was the fact that they included these seamless arms. For some reason, you actually get two of these, even though one arm obviously is going to be still inside of the sleeve, but I guess it's just to keep things consistent. He will have jointed elbows, after all, if you were to take the shirt off, which we will do in a second. As an alternative to that, though, they did give you a seamless arm. It's painted well, to their credit. I do like they darkened and made the bottoms of his arms to match the colors of his dingy hands. The thing about it, though, is being that it's encased inside of a very softer, rubbery plastic. I worry over time whether that will split. If you do display your figures, for example, in hot conditions, whether that may start to split, crack, for example, where you always have the elbow bent. Also, when you're bending the elbow, it leaves the resulting of that, just because you got the material here, obviously, on the sides, it sort of leaves these crinkled areas on either side of his arm. Not so much on this side. You see it more, though, definitely on this side here. And like I said, you're just going to take the arms off. You're going to replace it with these arms, and then, of course, you're just going to take whatever hands you decide you want to display this with. The thing you have to do, though, in order to get the shirt off, is you're going to have to take this harness off. And of course, it does have the holster on the back for his boomstick. You can try to unharness this, and it does have, of course, the means just to unloop the belt and take it off this way. One thing I did find that was a helpful means of taking off the arms, because you're going to, of course, have to take the arms off anyways, is if you take the arm, this takes just a little bit of hope on your end, and just detach the arm so it's loose like this. If you just if you've opened up his shirt just a little bit, you can actually take the arm. I've done this a couple of times and been generally pretty successful with this. You can take the arm and you can sort of feed it through. Now, there isn't a lot of space. This is not technically the correct way of really doing this, and normally I wouldn't have really not done this in front of the camera, because anybody looking at this would be thinking, like, I feel you're going about this all the wrong way. But if you do take the arm and you get it around the shirt, once you really get it around the shoulder area, you can then easily slide the arm up. And the reasoning why I do it this way, as I've done this a couple of times already, is once again, you get the shoulder out just around the joint here there of the torso. Then obviously you're going to have to remove the hand also as well. Just take the hand off. If you take this, you can then slide this through the shirt. And why I do it this way, for anybody that was curious, is because then you don't have to worry about unharnessing the strap. You only really need to do this the first time, because, there you go, once you take this arm out, there's enough freed space here that you can then take the sleeve of the shirt and fit this through the holster, just like that. And then from there, you want to just slide this again around, because you want to get the arms on out of both the loops. Just want to make sure I got this the right way. I do have this the right way. Again, just feed this through. What I really needed to do was feed it down the bottom section here, then take the sleeve and feed it also through the bottom section. Because once you get the arm through, then you can take this whole loop, take the head off also as well. There we go. And then all you're really literally doing is taking then the shirt. It's almost as if it's a magic trick. Taking the shirt, feeding it through the strap. Then you're going to take the strap, fit it around the head, and then just slide it down the other side. Just to show you that there's no trickery, and just, again, fit the sleeve through, get the strap over the neck, and then you can then easily take the strap and slide it completely off his arm. And then you don't have to unloop anything. The last thing, of course, you're going to want to then do is just detach. Now, the shirt works with snaps. I don't know if I like the idea of always constantly unsnapping it. And even the thing that I did, the trick that I showed you with detaching the arm and feeding it through the sleeve, it's probably not something I'm going to want to do a lot. Just again, you want to take the shirt and untuck it. Just remove it from the belt. They actually nicely gave you a long enough shirt that it tucks far enough into the pants. And again, you just take that, take the other hand off. And then you're going to take then this shirt and slide it completely off. So like these are what the arms look like right now. You can sort of see like they look a little bit better painted here in the forearms and look more like plastic further up. I might though still decide to display Ash. Now again, you could display him in two different ways really. You could display him right now. So like this is what his arm is going to look like if you want to go with the neutral arm, the defaulted arm. But if you did want to go with the skin covered arm, the one that's encased in the rubber, just to show you what the difference is between those, I'm going to just remove one of these, replace it with this one here. And like his body, by the way, is also a softer plastic. They've actually done a decent job of sculpting the top of his torso. And again, we just snap that arm in there like that. To show you the difference between the two, this is the skin arm, or the skin covered arm. This is the regular plastic arm. You can go with either. I mean, really, the coloring, at least to the credit of this arm, is closer to being the coloring of his torso. But I honestly kind of like the idea of having him with the elbow joint. You can still get, of course, the articulation on the Ash here by just bending the elbow. But you are going to be still getting that pinch of the rubber material that they've used, especially right there. Then, to reverse the steps, we're going to take the shirt now that has the torn front and ripped sleeve. And we're going to feed this through straight through his arm. There we go, just to get the exposed peg. And then we're going to do it on the other side as well. Now, being the fact that the arm has already got a hole in it, you don't have to put the arm on, obviously, first. You simply can just add the arm afterwards, which means that you don't have to be necessarily married to the idea that if you don't like the skin arm, which I did think I put the wrong arm in earlier, you can just simply add the arm on later. And then, or if you decide later on you want to switch it back just to the defaulted arm, which I'll show you the difference, providing I'll pick that up. I'll show you guys the difference of those two in a second once I get the shirt back on. Then from there, you're going to just take the shirt and you're going to want to button this up. Again, it's like dressing a small little toddler. Snapping the first snap, doing the second snap as well. I do wonder, though, instead of using snaps, if they could have simply just used Velcro. I mean, Velcro is not always the most prettiest of things to look at, but it certainly would make things easier when it comes to changing out the shirts. As I already mentioned, when changing and removing that arm in the first place, you probably aren't going to be doing this too often. If you already have both Ashes already, you probably just will decide for yourself that you're going to display one of the Ashes with the shirt torn, like I'm about to do, and then keep the other shirt, the other Ash, I should say, just with the non-torn shirt. You can see, hopefully you guys can see, one end is a plug or a peg. The other one goes into a hole. And being that they're snaps, it's never the easiest thing to get done. This part anyways is going to be tucking into the belt. Now the thing about the belt, for anyone that's going to have issues doing this, one thing I did notice, you can either use, like, for example, yourself a screwdriver, or I also got myself, like, these are my clippers that I usually use just to cut the twist ties. You can take the clippers, and because they curve in like this, you can take that part and use that sort of as the aid to tuck the shirt in. Again, you're just going to take that, just keep continuing to feed it into the belt area. And you're just going to want to keep guiding it in. It helps certainly as well to know where the belt is. Like, so if the belt's like right there, just again, like, you can also tilt the torso back just a little bit. But yeah, just keep guiding the shirt in, or use yourself, like I said, a screwdriver also as well. You don't have to, I think, necessarily undo the belt, providing you got a small enough tool. Maybe this wasn't the best tool to be using, but providing you got yourself a small enough tool, like a flat-headed screwdriver, for example, that would be more than enough, I think, to tuck the shirt in without having to undo the belt. Got the shirt all finally done. I did, in fact, actually undo the belt, even though the tool does work just to tuck the shirt in. If you really want the cleaner look, ultimately undoing the belt probably was the best way to go about doing that. One thing I did do, though, was leave the part of the shirt out, at least on this one side of his body, because I think in the film, Ash has a little bit of his shirt actually hanging out. You can completely tuck everything if you prefer, but I'm just decided to leave a little bit of the shirt hanging out. So the next thing we have to do is, of course, now add the strap that's going to hold, again, the boomstick holster and the cord, the actual hook that he used to pull the cord from the chainsaw. To put this on, I find it helps to put it on, first of all, like line everything up to where everything is supposed to go. This is supposed to go in this way. The hook is supposed to be on this side of his body. And then once that's in place, just first start with the side that doesn't have the arm. Seems pretty easy enough. And then from there, take then the arm, the one that actually is still attached, and just feed the arm through. So you basically want to have like this part underneath here, and you want to feed the arm then just in between, well, in this open area here. So the hook is going to end up settling on the side of his shirt. Just take his arm, bring it all the way up. There we go. Get it. Once you get it around the arm, I should say get it around the shoulder, it's no problem whatsoever. And then we're just going to adjust accordingly. There we go. Bring this around to the other side. And then just bring this down just to make it a little bit tighter. And bring that around just like that. I don't know if you saw all of that, but let's just, there we go. Bring it all down. And then you can adjust the shirt accordingly. And there we go. And then the only thing left then to do is to take, of course, then the arm that we want to use. So let's, for the sake of this, because of course this came included with it after all, we're going to use the rubber arm. And that, just going to line the hole up. You want to get the ripped section of the shirt at least lined up to the socketed joint. And you can also easily go in and just fix the shirt up once the shoulder is properly, or once the arm is properly snapped into the torso. And just snap it in. Snapping is not probably the best word to be using to describe this, but bring that up just a little bit, popping it onto the ball joint. I actually found that this was the hardest step, in fact, of ever getting everything back together with Ash, is just lining the socket up. Again, you don't have to worry so much about the ripped sections of his sleeve. You can easily pull those out afterwards. There we go. And then just take the part now of the shirt and just pull it all out and get it all around the shoulder there. And of course, you're going to want to go in there and just fix up the shirt a little bit as well. Once you get now the new arms in place, the last actual step that you have to do is taking those replacement pegs that weren't so much replacements before. If you don't want to have to then fish the ones that came out with the defaulted hands, just simply use those. Plug those into place. I did notice when it came to putting these pegs in the arms the first time around, you really have to snap them in until finally they click in place. Then take whatever hand you want to decide to display it with, pop that in place. And then the only thing left then to do is take then Ash's head. And once again, we'll just grab Ash's head, holding on to sort of more the neck area than anything else, and just plopping that back into place. And that, short of just the fact that this hand is missing here on this side of his body, get that plugged in place. There we go. That's what Ash looks like now with the torn shirt. It may seem somewhat intimidating the first time you may get this figure out of the packaging. You're looking at that, you're like, do I have to unstrap everything? How is everything going back into place? Like I said, again, this is not per the instructions. I thought to myself, well, if there must be a way, if you can just simply remove this one arm, then you can kind of just unharness everything without having to unstrap it. And you can. Again, I wouldn't recommend doing this, but this is one way I found as a workaround to getting that ripped shirt, or at least the harness off before you change the shirt. And then just to show you what the regular Ash looks like next to the torn shirt Ash. The only thing that's a little bit absent here is now with the ripped shirt on Ash, we can kind of just peel that back a little bit to expose his rib cage. Is that I wish that there was just a little bit of extra blood afforded to his torso, like cuts, some scratches, just again, a little bit of blood or bleed, maybe even into the shirt as well. Because looking at the two shirts, they seem pretty similar in the level of grunge that they've added in the paint. I feel like, fine, it works good for maybe the basic standard release Ash, but I think, again, if you're going to be doing the luxury release Ash with now the torn shirt, I really would have loved a little bit of injury to the body of Ash underneath, not making his torso so clean like this. And yeah, probably adding some much appreciated blood soaking into his shirt as well. For those also asking, this is what Ash looks like with his regular defaulted arms, the ones that didn't have the skin covering over top of them. And again, just to look at that, I mean, it's not super jarring either. Yeah, there is articulation points, but how many 6-scale figures do you have in your collection space that has visible arms like this? At least the lower forearm, the part that actually does match closer to his hands, isn't that far of a stretch than actually the actual bare plastic color. I think it's easily passable. Just to show you again the difference between this one and the rubber cased arms. The only thing that's really different about these is the fact that, yeah, they would have added a lot more paint to this one and gives you that seamless look. but I think both of them are actually fine. For the time being, I actually might just decide to display Ash with the articulated elbows, the ones visible like this right now, and maybe just for the time being leave these skin arms off. Why do we keep calling them skin arms? Again, I like the fact that Asmus would have included this with the figure. But again, it's not just Asmus. For me, across the board, I really don't like when figures come with seamless bodies like this. I mean, it looks good visually, but the problem, of course, of things splitting, especially on joints like elbows, if you're always going to have the elbow bent like this, then I think depending on where you end up displaying your figures, and I'm a big advocate of feeling that if you have studio lights, like if you're, for example, displaying your figures in detolfs, I really advocate the idea that I think that will dry out artificial skin like this and even causing more problems down the road of this actually splitting. For the time being, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a problem. But down the road, though, whether that will be splitting, I can't really say or not. But I think for the time being, I actually just think I like the idea of having Ash displayed. Yes, it is meaning that he's going to be more visibly articulated in the one elbow. It doesn't give you as well that seamless look. But easily, with at least this side of his arm being visible, you can easily just pop the arm back off and replace it with the fully seamless arm instead if you want. Articulation on luxury Ash would be the same as the regular standard release Ash. So going through that right now, the figure does have a ball joint. You've already seen as well that he does have what seems to be a dumbbell ball joint. So there would be basically a ball joint here and a ball joint further up, and then a connecting post in between. That allows the head to rotate not only all the way around, but allows the head to look down, look up, and also can rocket back and forth also as well. As for the arms, they are exactly the same, so those both hinge out, and I guess one of the benefits of actually now having a sleeve ripped off like this is you can actually see how those arms work. They hinge out at a comfortable 90-degree angle bend. You can take them and rotate them all the way around. There's a bicep swivel. The figure does have a double hinge on the elbow, and he does have articulation in the hand, not only a rotation, but also a hinge back and forth too. The upper torso is on a ball joint, even though now we see the way they've sculpted the body. So the ball joint is actually a little bit further down. There is no part right here that actually has an independent ball joint. That's fine. Legs do split out. You can see there, or more so here, there's a ratcheted joint. You can take the legs and move them forward, move them back. There's a swivel at the top of the thigh. There is a double hinge, from what I can see at least, on the knee. And there, of course, the same articulation point as before on the boots. I know we didn't really spend a lot of time looking at the details done here for Ash, but again, considering we did already cover off this figure earlier in the standard release, nothing does change. It does have, again, that ball joint here on the boots. Nicely sculpted boots there also here as well for Ash. Yeah, again, like the good thing about this Ash is not simply just the fact that he does come with that elaborate display base. It was already an Ash I really did like, but even if you had picked up, hold on for 1 second, bring it in. Even if you had picked up the standard release Ash, the merits are certainly there for picking up this release also as well. Not only are you getting the benefit of the torn shirt, which already right out the gate, without even displaying it with the elaborate display stand, you already have two different looks for Ash. But the fact that this figure also comes included with that big elaborate display base, part of the cellar door. Henrietta comes with Linda's head, comes with the vise, comes with the wall of the cabin. There's really a lot going on here for Ash, with already being a great figure already. Definitely worth, I think, not only picking up the standard release, but picking up also the luxury edition also as well. You get in both the cases a really decent likeness. I continue to say this about this Ash. For the price point of what these guys were going for, granted, yes, the luxury edition was going to be a little bit more. It's about $100 or so more than this guy right here. But the regular release Ash without the display stand, so if that's not really something that was all that you were interested in the first place, that regular standard release Ash was only $199. So it was about $200 for what you get. I think is a really good looking Ash. Head sculpt again is really good on this figure. Has decent quality clothing. Again, you've got the boomstick. You've got yourself the Necronomicon, one of the best Necronomicons of a 6-scale format. Yeah, Asmus is doing some really good stuff with the Evil Dead property. I don't know whether we are going to be getting anything outside more, though, than just Evil Dead 2. I mean, we have now ourselves two versions of different Ashes, even though they're technically somewhat the same figures. But I wonder if we are going to be getting anything else in the Evil Dead franchise. I mean, we could always go back to Evil Dead, the original Evil Dead, or even think further beyond that. Maybe something from, I don't know, Army of Darkness. That would be an interesting figure to have in a collection. One thing I didn't actually cover in this review that I really should have was to show you how to attach the chainsaw to the forearm of Ash. Now, I did cover that off when we had a look at the standard release figure, so if you did want to see how to work that and attach the chainsaw, feel free to just check out my review of the standard release Ash. But it attaches the exact same way, and it unfortunately also has the exact same problems too. Mentioned already, because of the teeth the chainsaw are using, well, they had used a metal to replicate the look of that end of the chainsaw. It does add what I feel to be unnecessary weight to the weight of the chainsaw, thereby adding extra stress and weight to the elbow joint. Right now, I've got Ash with his arm extended out. I don't think I'm going to be doing this long term, though, because I think the longer that he has his arm out like this, the looser the joints are going to be for his elbow. It is, again, the only thing I would really be critical about when it came to this release, that I really think, even though I appreciate the fact that they did go the extra mile of adding metal to the chainsaw, I really don't think it was necessary in the first place. That chainsaw looks just as good if it was done in plastic, and by doing it all in plastic would have made the lighter load of the chainsaw easier for Ash to actually bear. I think of long-term plans of displaying this figure, I'm probably just going to have the arm maybe off down to the side. That's something I mentioned in the review when we looked at the standard release. It's just too much weight, I think, to have his arm always bent, because I think what you're probably going to be doing is having a loose elbow in Ash a lot sooner than it needs to be. As for the rest of the figure, though, it's just as good as what we looked at before with the standard release. You're not getting anything really different too much in the way of Ash. All of his accessories are the same, except for, of course, Deadite Ash's alternate head sculpt, which is not something I'm going to be displaying with this figure, even though I have already considered the idea of maybe picking up another one. For the price point of what these guys are going for, even though really the one that is the luxury edition does come include with the Deadite Ash head, but the price of getting the standard release is still $199. So if you, like myself, had picked up the luxury and still would like to use the Deadite Ash, maybe I might just consider to buy the extra standard release Ash at another $200 and have that one displayed with the Deadite head sculpt. As it certainly goes for this one, there's a lot to look at. Not only are you getting all the great accessories that came packaged with the standard release, but again, you're getting the Deadite Ash head sculpt, you're getting the torn shirt, so right there's two different ways of displaying the figure. Not to mention as well, you're getting one of the craziest looking displays that we've ever gotten for a 6-scale figure. The fact that we actually have the cellar door, we have the back wall of the cabin, and we have the vise that holds Deadite Linda's head in place. That's really, really cool. Unfortunately, though, it does mean that if you are displaying the figure with Henrietta inside of the cellar, then you're going to have to sort of shimmy Ash over just a little bit more. He can't really be standing on top of the cellar door and also have the cellar door open, so I almost feel like you have to choose one or the other. If you decide you want to display Henrietta inside, then yeah, you're probably going to have to move Ash just a little bit more off to the edge. In that case, I do wish that they had made the display stand just a little bit wider to accommodate both Henrietta and Ash standing at it at the same time. A big thank you, though, to the folks over at Asmus Toys that did provide this sample of the luxury edition Evil Dead 2 Dead by Dawn Ash. Have you guys had a chance to pick this figure up yet? And if you have, what do you guys think of it? Let me know down below in the comments section. If you guys are also new to this channel, you're enjoying the content that you're seeing, and you haven't already done so, make sure that you hit the subscribe button down below, that you're turning on the bell notification, and that you're making sure that you're coming back while we have wrapped up the review for right now of the Evil Dead 2 Dead by Dawn Ash Luxury Edition. There's definitely going to be a lot more videos still coming your way. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.